Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are helping to shape the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Larry Yaw. Larry is a renowned architect based in Colorado's Roaring Fork Valley, whose work connects people with nature using contemporary, sustainable, and conservation-focused design. Growing up in rural Montana gave Larry a deep appreciation for the utilitarian character of ranch homes and their thoughtful integration into the landscapes, aspects that form the foundation of much of his work today. Through his design, Larry has demonstrated a unique ability to pay homage to the past while boldly pushing beyond preconceived notions of architecture in the American West. If I had to use one word to describe Larry, it would probably be adventurous. A quest for adventure seems to guide all aspects of his professional and personal lives. As you'll hear in our conversation, Larry has traveled the world many times over, sometimes with his full family in tow, seeking out enriching experiences everywhere from the South Pacific to the Swiss Alps. He's also intellectually adventurous, as evidenced by his deep knowledge of history, conservation, Native Americans, and many other subjects related to the West and beyond. Physical adventures are a daily occurrence for Larry, whether it's pedaling single track, stalking trout with his fly rod, hiking in the high mountains around Aspen, or shooting birds on the Montana prairie. All of these experiences provide the fuel that keep Larry's creative engine firing at turbo speed, decade after decade. This was a super fun conversation, and I came away from it both inspired and enlightened. We discussed a broad range of topics, including Larry's architecture, his creative process, and how he's managed to stay consistently creative for so long. We chatted about his early years in Montana, some of his adventures around the world, and his thoughts on conservation in the American West. Larry is a true student of the West, so he had plenty of book recommendations, which are always great. There's a ton of interesting information in this interview, so don't forget to check out the episode notes on the webpage for links to everything we discuss. Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoy. You meet somebody at a cocktail party or on the ski lift, and they say, "What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Well, I say, about what?
That's kind of what I do. Are you talking about work? Are you talking about fun?
Yeah.
That's similar.
No,
I thought I was just throwing smart ass.
Answer is that's a smart ass answer. But what I do is I'm an architect, mm-hmm. and I am a grandfather, and I spend as much time outside as I possibly can in a variety of things. But nature is my sanctuary.
Yes.
I don't get it. I don't go that far, but believe me, somebody would just go roll their eyes. If you said, what I do, I travel to sanctuaries and wild places. Uh-huh. They roll their eyes, of course. So I keep it simple. And if it goes beyond that, well, what kind of architecture do you do? And I would answer that as I am hell-bent on creating a fit between contemporary architecture and nature. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that nature, whether it's through a big open window or through a view or through the ability to cross a threshold and be there, is enriching mm-hmm. to your life. And so the connection to nature part is a big part of what I just said in connecting, but I'm contemporary by persuasion.
Sure.
And there's some really nice stuff in Boulder you see popping up in little places.
Uh-huh. There's some right in this neighborhood.
Well, like this neighborhood, or their neighborhood, where it's really very tightly grained uh-huh. neighborhoods have been plopped down in the 30s or 40s. Little repeated prototypes. Uh-huh. But some of them are getting some magic put on them. That speak of today's taste, today's world, sure. today's culture. Post-millennium thing. God.
Sure. So, I'm not at all an architecture expert, but when I look at your work, I see that it seems that it takes into account a lot of the history of the West, and then kind of the classic architecture that people would think of when they think of the West. But then it seems that you're adding a more some contemporary touches to it and kind of pushing it forward a little bit.
Way forward.
Is that accurate?
And being born in Montana was amazing to me. I was always amazed, high school or when I started being able to drive and could get out and hunt birds or just walk through country, but in rural ranching environments, that the buildings are so simple and direct and connected, and that they really formed enclaves around ranch headquarters, if you want to use that, where working proximities were important, keeping out of the wind, shelter, and a little enrichment of a garden or something like that. But it later occurred to me that this was contemporary architecture in a way, because simple, utilitarian, interesting forms that didn't dominate the landform. Boing, that light went off. That was
so at that age, it started going off.
It did. It started going off. I didn't connect it till I was then actually studying architecture, but then it connected.
Sure.
And so there's a respect for landform, land use, and man-made object upon it were out of need. And a lot of these ranch compounds would be started with a small, structured place to live, then children and more cattle came along, or sheep or goats or chickens, and they had to add on to it. So it was an architecture, an additive kind of forms.
Sure.
But they always respected where the sun was, where the snow didn't slide, access, winds, all those things that came natural to a rancher were things that I learned should come natural to an architect.
That makes sense. And so where in Montana did you grow up?
I grew up in Great Falls.
Okay. Yeah.
And went to high school till I was a senior, then to Sarasota, Florida for my senior year.
Okay.
Which is another aha moment.
What did you learn there? I would imagine that.
I learned that there was a whole different way to embrace life.
Yeah.
Just different activities, different values. I painted in high school.
Okay.
And played sports as well. But the painting part was sort of regarded as a sideline sissy. Yeah, it was so macho. When I got to Sarasota, that's cool. You paint? Wow. Show me your stuff. And it was embraced as strongly as a part of your part of your character, as was running a touchdown.
Yeah, that's neat.
So that was a whole different change in cultural mindset for me. And it was water skiing and traipsing through cottonmouth-filled, swamps, chasing wild turkeys and hunting that. And I was still hunting and all that stuff then. But
and so at that point, and so did you go to college in Washington State? Is that correct?
Well, there was a series of things from Sarasota. I then had started playing golf when I was in high school.
Got it.
And so I wanted to play golf and study engineering, because at that point we were in this technological lag between Russia. So everybody made heroes out of engineers when they came to speak in high school. So boom, I went to Florida State.
Okay.
Studied engineering, did not turn me on at all. There was this.
Was it the lack of artistic?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, in those words, sure. That's a simple way to say it.
Sure.
So then I finished that and went immediately since that. I went to more undergraduate school, the University of Washington in Seattle.
Okay.
And that was another aha moment. I mean, it all came together. Passion, intellectual interest, the whole deal. Artful, being artful. Finished that, and those were the days when, to go to graduate school now. I've watched these kids fill out thousands of forms, compete with thousands of people for that. Well, I got lucky, and I was so turned on Washington, I took a lot of liberal arts courses, and at the end of the year, my graduating year, they told me I had Phi Beta Kappa on me.
Not bad.
Are you kidding me? and it was the top of my class.
But it was because obviously you were working hard, but you just loved it.
It was passion, passion driven, and that served to. So in those, as I use this paper trail to make another point, my dean, who became friends. In fact, my thesis was a mountain village, a ski village, but not near parking. You had to tram up to it. So that was, anyway, we got on a big boat in Lake Washington, and I brought by then our professors were all friends. It wasn't like, march me through the grade point and stuff. We had the final thesis review out on this kind of yacht with all the professors. And then we went through it all, cracked the bottle, and had a, fishing good time together.
Sure. And
that was a nice way to leave. But where was I going with this? Well, there's two things that happened. So my dean, who was on part of that, just calls up the dean at Harvard and the dean at Columbia and said, I got this guy, and he needs a ride. Done. I mean, that's how simple it was. That's how simple it was then. And I went back to Cambridge and looked at Harvard, and I talked to all the students. I thought that was better than talking to professors. And they were, like graduate students too, bitching about everything. And that was the first place I went, to Harvard. And then I went down to Columbia, and they weren't bitching so much, so I decided to go to Columbia. Whether it was a good or bad move or not.
I think it worked out for you.
But the other good point about that was my wife's family from Seattle. We were dating at that early on, before graduation.
Yep.
And her parents were, I would say, in a old family status in town. So, like revered sort of thing. So naturally they wondered who this joker was, this long-haired, guy, who wasn't Japanese or a Chinese. They first thought she was dating a Chinese architecture student because of my last name. Anyway, so when we came back from some presentation deal, Phyllis and I relayed this Phi Beta Kappa, top your class, and he just got into Columbia. Things changed. That was the other aha moment. I was finally okay. Finally.
That's funny. So you went to New York, grad school, loved it. But when you were there, were you always thinking about the West? Did you always have a plan to move back west, or did you?
I didn't have a plan. There was a plan was evolved, and it was really a lifestyle choice. Choices that didn't get made on that basis, it was career made. Most choices of my contemporaries were career based. They were European graduate students and U.S. guys. They all went to work for the best firms. And I did too for a while.
You did want to do that?
Yeah, I did that, played that thing. Because I needed to learn something. And then we rented a little cabin in Vermont where I spread out. It couldn't have been bigger than this living room. I had papers all over the place. Because the taking the architectural exam for licensure was tough. It's 4 days, 12 hours a day. You didn't get to pick at subjects like you can now. Do one at a time.
Yeah.
So I studied my ass off here and had this cabin floor with papers, studies all over the place because I heard it was such a pain in the ass. I didn't want to do it twice. Well, fortunately, I didn't have to. I went and took the test and made it.
Great.
In New York. And I tell you, I'm to this day not sure that wouldn't have been a turning point. I think my grit would have kept me going, but I wasn't sure. Yeah. It was tough and wore me out.
I bet so.
So anyway, I got out of that, and then we started thinking about, well, okay, now you got this. You've sort of gone through those steps, as it were, professional steps. And, of course, we were hiking every day in Vermont, too, other than studying. But and fly fishing and having, I needed those breaks.
Sure.
Then we began to, Phyllis and I began together to think about, wait a minute, we've got to drive from Boston. There are 20 lines to get to go skiing, on the highway, in the parking lot, in the ticket line, in the lift line, just
and then there's only 1,000 feet.
The layers between intent and fun were awesome, awesomely bad.
Sure.
Against our grain. And none of that happened in the West because I'd also gone to Aspen a couple of times in undergraduate school to study and meet a couple of architects in Aspen and ski with friends and all that. And I taught skiing at the University of Washington.
Okay.
So as a means to do two things: A, meet girls, and B, to get a little income. The income part worked.
Yeah. So you were working at a big firm, and
anyway, so we decided that we would go west to Aspen to figure out what to do. And as I said before, the issue never came up. I joined some friends, started a firm.
So where do you think it seems to me that there's a kind of a track record of not being scared to go out on your own, or not being scared of a little adventure, whether it's
addictive seeking adventure, really.
And so, I mean, where do you think that came from? Because it seems like your thought to leave leave New York, or leave kind of a stable, normal path, and strike out on your own. That's adventurous. I think your architecture is adventurous. It kind of goes against the grain.
I think
in
it
some
came
ways.
way back in Montana. My grandfather and father were outdoorsmen, so they took me with them.
Were your parents from Montana?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, several generations back.
Wow.
Yeah,
well, that is adventurous.
Yeah, and so I was, how
rugged individualism.
Like we talked about, you taking your kids for a hike and burying them in the pleasures that they never would have understood to be part of their lives. Well, that's kind of it happened to me with fishing, hunting, camping, horses, my aunt's ranch, all that stuff.
Did you have siblings?
Pardon? Yeah, I had one brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys had some adventures, huh?
Yeah, we did. He wasn't at that point. He is now as adventurous as I was, or didn't poke it. So I would get either a friend, we'd ride bikes out with our 22s, and go shoot rabbits and that sort of stuff. And then we'd ride bikes out further and just walk in the prairie. And so I always or on my own. And there were a lot of it was on my own. And that's kind of a quiet trademark, is that when I couldn't find anybody to do it with, that remains today.
Yeah.
I just go do it. And I, first of all, found the kind of excitement in what's over that ridge, what's at the end of that valley. And I was always rewarded by these sanctuaries and excitement. And I just sit there and let it be embraced by this stuff. And there was a satisfaction of completing an adventure, starting 1A, and being rewarded by it. And I think that just sort of fed into my life. And when my parents, we went to Sarasota, Florida my senior year because my mom had MS and there was some alleged guru who was there. So that took me there. I bitched and moaned all the way down. Probably, I think I did, Amy. Yeah. I was told I did. And when I got there, God, the light went on, how cool that was. So I was rewarded again let's call it an adventure, but I was placed in a place that I didn't want to be, and I loved it. I learned to love it, or it loved me, or something, There was a fit.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of that is...
So I think it's been that way, whether alone. I'd always rather share these moments with someone else or some group of other people. And Phyllis and I still do this. We just got back from walking over 100 miles through the Swiss Alps.
Did you really?
Yeah, maybe 4,000 vertical a day.
Where was it? I mean, was it around Mount Blanc or something?
No, it's Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
So that's France.
Got it.
Yeah. I started in Gstaad. We just went village to village over these passes and all that stuff. And so Phyllis, early on, was my partner in these things. She wasn't as sort of hike-oriented as I was. But, boy, I'm dog to it. I mean, she's an addict.
Did she grow up doing outdoor adventure as well?
In Seattle, yeah, not as much as I did. Her parents had a boat, which they went up to Desolation Sound.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
In Canada, yeah.
That's intense. Yeah, when I did a semester in Knowles up there, and I remember when the you'd have to really time everything with the tides because the tides were so there was such a huge amount of up and down that between the little islands, it's like a raging river.
Oh yeah, no, they're called tide rapids.
It was wild.
They are.
That was kind of my first real taste of adventure,
where you had to kind of time things. Like you didn't want to get caught out picking, digging for clams or picking oysters off rocks.
Sure, because then the tide comes.
Because you may not be able to wade back.
Oh yeah, I remember we were hiking along the coast at one point, and there are all these dead trees that wash up, and the tide would come in against those cliffs. And if you had to be out of there because all those logs would start moving around and smashing the cliffs, I mean, it's. That, coming from North Carolina, I just couldn't get my head around it.
Well, that was her deal. And then, so that was mountains. And she skied, and her parents took her to Sun Valley, which they did every year. And she skied. So she was into outdoors for sure. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've done a ton of international travel as well. Has that, I'm sure it does, but how has that influenced your work and your perspective?
Oh, a lot. Firstly, not unlike Sarasota, seeing the way culture has culture and place has created placemaking and style, if you want to. I hate that term, but style in different places. Yeah. And it was like walking through hill towns and seeing these little spaces that we don't see here, absent of traffic signals and turn left and right, wayfinding and exploration. We're all part of that. And that's been, we've probably spent 9 or 10 months of our lives in the Argentine mountains.
Oh, really?
There, and Chile, and we also finished a trip in Norway hiking the fjord country last spring. So what it teaches you that, and our kids also, that not everybody is, sort of white and lives in suburbia. There's poverty, there's happiness in poverty, and there's black and white and yellow people all over the world, and they're no different than you. All our kids learned those lessons through our travel. We took them on in 1980. We just said, here's an adventure. We bagged everything. Told the guys working in my office that I was going to take 6 months off and have a sabbatical. And that resulted in a tradition in our firm where every year another one of our partners could take 6 months and do whatever he wanted with it.
That's great.
So we did. Took our little kids. Lindsay was 3. And then Kirsten, our oldest daughter, was 12. And we went basically around, when I say around the world, it was adventure by adventure, sailed in the South Seas, all over the place. And on a bare boat or with a captain where we didn't know what the hell was going on. And then, Australia and up to Indonesia and up to Kashmir. And we hiked for a month in the high Himalayas, bordering Pakistan and China and Kashmir.
Wow.
So the kids, we did that out of adventure. And we did it because we wanted the kids to get it, that they're not alone in the world, and there's no strangers in the world.
I think that is such a great lesson to teach kids, because my wife grew up with a lot of international travel, and that was kind of her focus in college, and spent a lot of time in developing nations. And then we actually moved to Costa Rica for a year right after we got married. And I'd been to Argentina for a climbing trip, But that's when you get in the mountains, it's the mountains, and there's not really interaction with people.
Which part of Argentina?
Mendoza, up Aconcagua.
Oh, Aconcagua.
Yes.
Our son did the Polish Glacier.
Okay, yeah, I did I went to the base of Polish Glacier and then went around it and went up.
They did it because they met all these Swedish guys who left a ton of really cool stuff up there. They couldn't make the weather wouldn't let them go up that route. So they went up to this sort of little platform where there's all this stuff, oxygen, tents. These guys were beat up and on their way out, so they went that way. And they're technically capable.
Sure. It's an adventure down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so at age 30, I guess we moved to Central America, and it was life changing. It was a formative experience for me at age 30.
Yeah.
And it changed my whole perspective on really, one of the biggest things, and you can appreciate this, is how much stuff Americans have. Everything, from the massive houses to I remember we came home for Christmas and I went to the grocery store and there was an entire aisle of nothing but bottled water. I know. And it blew my mind. And I was thinking, I wonder how I would be if I'd experienced this at age 6 or 7. And so I think that's really, and I would imagine that international travel really has influenced your work.
It really has. Now, culturally it does, because it teaches you that social factors, cultural factors, whatever they are, affect outcome in habitation, for example. Not only relationships and form, but in social contact. So you learn there's a bunch of ways to do that, but it's formative. And that if you take the time to understand the nature of a site, I mean the pure nature of it, if you take time to understand the history of place and the settlement, human settlement, and what it did or didn't do, there are lessons there.
Oh yeah.
To not do or to integrate.
Sure. One question I have, I read a ton of history of the West, and there seems to be a disconnect between, when white people moved out here, it was because they wanted to be alone. The whole myth of rugged individualism. I want my 160 acres, be by myself. Nobody. I want to be completely self-sufficient.
That's the homestead part of Western expansion.
But now people are coming around and realizing that the only way it's going to work for any of us to live out here is cooperation, community, figuring out how to share.
Yeah.
And so how do you think about that when you're designing, when you're working in these mountain communities where there's this history of leave me alone and you're trying to build community?
You're talking about the territorial imperative, I think, is what it's referred as. A couple things. I coach small, that you can live simply and in rich ways without having a show-off house, like you just sold your company and you want to build it bigger than the next corporate show-off down the road. So I really preach small, contemporary, and when there's a lot of aspirants, a lot of people, a lot of money. So I teach them to try to teach them through the experience of collaboration, to understand that you don't need to do it. The reason you're here is out there. It's not here. You should have, and don't make a master bedroom with a reading suite or that, because you should just sleep there and get the hell out, get up in the mornings and get out and hike.
I love that. In the article your daughter wrote, there was a quote, and I have it here. It says, "I'm not going to design 3 little sitting areas around the master bedroom so you can sit inside all day. You get out of bed, you have breakfast, you go ski, you get out there." I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I use different vocabularies to try to, you get to tune into a person's core and try to, I'm not preaching or teaching lifestyle. I'm teaching how live rich, live of economic means in all ways. Don't throw your shit on the trail to, don't buy excessive thises or that's, don't have a TV in every room, whatever it happens to be, or what fits that deal. And sometimes I'm not successful, in all that, but it's a mantra.
Sure.
And I try to teach them that The process is a creative adventure. Get into it.
I bet that's interesting trying to teach people, because I would think a good number of them, they're completely focused on the end goal, which is I want this great house in Aspen. But I would think that you miss a lot if you don't really immerse yourself in the process.
You miss a lot. Even the whole firm, tries to make them authors of their own house, or strong participants in the creative process. So there's a reward in that, and having you kind of think about this, make a decision about this. I wonder if I made the right decision. All those things that accompany a courageous creative process. And in the end, they really appreciate, they feel like they have made their house. They have, like I don't back off to the point where I'm simply the instrument of their will, because I enjoy, the whole thing too.
Sure.
But if you can make them feel like they had a very special part in the creation of saying they have ownership, and emotional ownership is a really cool kind of an outcome to have.
Definitely.
Even if I'm helping them get there.
Definitely, especially for something, for anything, but especially for a home. There's
Then it's very personal. It's not they're not representing stockholders, where they've got to probably be a little more, a little more conventional. And I teach them don't be afraid of whim. Don't be afraid of, understand that if you turn that corner and come to this space where the light comes in like that, and it only focuses on one tree, and the sun and the leaves are different 4 times a year. See, that's an aha moment. That's special about your house and your experience. Because it's all about experience in the end, it is. And it's about being a partner, not only with your wife, but with a team that has an end goal. And it might, that end goal is not a linear process at all. It's exploring here, learning, pulling in, integrating, doing this and that. Oh, yeah, and we forgot about the, places for your spoons finally. But,
So when you're in the midst of this creative process, I love learning about creatives and how they work. I just think it's so interesting. And so when you are creating, is it obviously it's challenging, but do you really enjoy the creative process? Like, this is fun, or is it
fuel? It's absolute fuel for living for me. It's that important.
Every bit of it, enjoy the struggle, but it is a struggle, I'm sure.
There are points, for the regulatory world is full of layers, and you got to go, you do it, but you learn either skills or process to make those with the pain in the ass parts of the process, the part that are not just create. But you can be creative, and you have to have those tools in order to be creative. If you understand that, and you go through and you deal with those things, you deal with them because they're another tool to let you be creative.
Sure. So that process, I would imagine that process and the travel and just it seems like you're always out seeking new experiences. Is that what allows you to continue to be creative after all these years?
Oh yeah. Oh God.
Because I would think after a while, how do you come up with new stuff? But it seems like you're always getting new inputs, processing.
If you view every situation as unique, which it is, by the time you look at where it's located, the seasons, the time of day, the flora, fauna, the culture, the people themselves, the lifestyle they bring to this moment, everything is unique.
Yep.
All you have to do is understand that and let that play into the creative process. That way, it's just a rolling wheel.
Sure.
There's no conclusion to the creative juice.
That's exciting. So when you look back at maybe, let's say, after 2 years after you moved to Aspen and been on your own, and then now, what's the biggest change in your work or in your outlook on your work?
Probably a couple things. Either understand the purpose or purposelessness of overregulation. That's just a sidebar. I think that I'm more poignantly concerned and make choices on the fact of who people are. Mm-hmm. You know, I like honest people. I like people who are not shady, who are out front, who basically bring integrity to the table.
Yep.
So I make those choices, and I think those things play into the architecture. So there's a integrity, more focused integrity about connection to nature, mm-hmm. connecting people to nature, not just architecture. It's about experience. Mm-hmm. And so not another change maybe. I was very facile at sculpting crazy, wonderful things. But early on, they were more about the sculpting than the experience of inhabiting.
That makes sense.
So that has become more focused. Part of the end game, I guess. Is,
sure.
You know, it's sort of like you finally take some of the fat off the bone.
Yeah, like we were talking about before.
And get down to the bone.
Sure. That makes sense. So, you know, your work is obviously connected to nature. You've got a personal interest in nature. I know we talked about that you serve on some boards of conservation organizations in the area.
Just one at the moment.
At the Roaring Fork Conservancy.
Yeah.
And so
that's about watershed protection in a real nutshell. I mean,
sure.
I could go on and on, but
so one of everybody I have on this podcast is somehow conservation minded in what they do. And the thing I've found is that the word conservation can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So what does the word conservation mean to you?
Well, I'll back up a little bit. I think there's a point in your life where you have reached some of your goals, some, mm-hmm. not all, because hopefully that passion's an unending stream. But it's time to give back mm-hmm. in everybody's life, and you should be thinking about that. We preach that to our young, architects out of school. Get connected with the decision makers today in a nonprofit world. Give back. That's part of the criteria for working, besides being a hot jock in our, they just happen to be in our firm. So I think that is the thing about, where did this question start? Giving back. When I think about conservation.
What would be your definition of conservation? Because everybody seems to have such a, it can mean saving the whales, or it can mean saving the
I think it's the strongest thing connected to me is the preservation of natural habitat. Mm-hmm. I mean habitat for enjoyment of humans, connected with a balanced habitat for the creatures that have always lived there. I'm very much of the Plains Indian mentality. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'll go back to that in a minute, but and I've studied it because when I was another aha moment when my adventureness, or way back when, was I worshipped the idea of Indians, but Indians and adventure.
Yeah, I read that. I was going to ask.
And that was, but see, that was the warrior chief image. Mm-hmm. The glorious guy on a painted horse with shit hanging on him and his spear and beads and. But that translated into a real study of Western movement and the effect of our expansion on the rituals, the belief systems, and the shrinking of their environment. We cause a shrinking of their environment. So back to the conservation, and that's a factor, or let's say a early contributing mindset headed that way, is I believe in preserving the natural world. Okay, and that has many exponents to it, from bitching about where oil leases are gotten, but anything having to do with preserving a watershed or the natural, even though we have paths through it, but let's say walking lightly in nature. Mm-hmm. That would be my idea. The ability to share those ideas, the spirituality of being in nature, So that it backs up to creating places where nature can be itself.
Sure.
Okay. Whether there's a fire there or not, that's part of nature.
Yeah. Well, and that seems to be reflected in your work, finding this balance between there are going to be people here. And so we want to have somehow keep it all connected.
Yeah. And even in architecture, the idea of treading lightly on the earth is a prevalent.
That's what I admire about your work that I've seen is that it's, when a lot of people think of moving to Aspen or moving to Jackson Hole, they think of building some massive log cabin that sits on.
Jackson is logged out.
And it's I feel like your work is much more respectful of the landscape. And in the old days, there were log cabins and that was the way to do it. But it seems like yours is.
I've never done a log house, and I won't.
Yeah, no, that's good. There are enough of them out there.
and tied into this whole thing is the idea of sustainability. When you walk lightly on the earth, if you want to view a house or any piece of architecture as a menu, and you pick on the menu, you're picking on extraction of resources somehow.
Yes.
And, if you do it out of wood, there are forests that you can choose where the wood comes from, that it's part of a natural harvest or something. But that whole idea of sustainability has been another thing I plugged in way strong emotionally, philosophically, and choice-wise.
Yeah.
So when you're careful to make these choices that don't extract from wherever part of the world they come from, needlessly or unreplaceably.
Sure.
So that's more materiality, if kind of choices.
Yeah.
But they go way back to rainforests and to Brazil and wherever this stuff comes from.
We're all connected. So I would like to hear more about your experience with the Indians, because I read that in that great article your daughter wrote, which I'll link that on the webpage so other people can read it, because she is much better at this stuff than I am. But
it was an interesting thing. I said I was always excited in the adventure, the romantic version of, as a young guy to 11, age 12, my family took me to Browning, Montana. We had a cabin, we rented a cabin up there. So plunk in the middle of the Blackfeet Indian reservation. And don't ever say Blackfoot. It's Blackfeet.
Blackfeet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people sort of say Blackfoot, like it's past tense of Blackfeet or something. That was the core of the town, or these thousands of acres of Blackfeet reservation was. And there was, in this town, at the end of it, was a kind of a, Indians made backrests out of willows and painted them and stuff there. But there was this girl my age sitting in a white doe-skin dress with beads, vermilion on her face, ermine tail on her braids. I fell in love with her. 12. I mean, I was infatuated with her. And that infatuation, I just walked right up to her. And it wasn't like romantic. It was fascination with the whole Indian thing, with her as a person. Virginia Homegun. So we became friends.
Oh, wow. And
then, shorten that out, she invited me to have dinner with her family in the tent next door. They had a community dinner. I mean, this is all civilized stuff, by the way. Turns out her old man was the head of the Blackfoot Council.
Wow.
So 2 nights later, I'm in this tent with a fire, and they do this whole ceremony about making me a Blackfeet. Okay.
Really?
That was an aha moment. Now, then I sort of lost, I made summer later touch with her. She grew up and I grew up. Kept in touch with her. I called her then, trying to track her down 10 years ago. And she was still there and she didn't remember me.
Oh, really?
That's okay. But I said, it was so important. It was such a vivid memory and experience to me. I was really sort of shocked that she didn't remember. It wasn't that important to her. I was just another gringo.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was that. Then started translating to reading everything I could about, not only specific, people, Red Cloud or whoever it was, and what their war game was, what their attitudes were, their spirituality, their rituals that bound them to the earth. And it was all about balance, about we are just another two-legged version of buffalo. We all had, when they'd kill, for example, a buffalo, or they'd kill or wound a guy from a different clan, they would worship the spirit of that thing before they took the meat home, or before they walked away from, scalped him, or whatever it was. That's an exaggeration. Not often did they scalp each other.
Sure.
They waited till the white guys showed up. That was taking coup that counted.
So what book are there?
But anyway, then
go ahead.
Yeah. Then I started. I've always sketched and painted.
Okay.
Always. So I decided, after going through I made a book on which Lindsay has, anyway, a whole book on pen and ink sketches all over the world.
Oh, really?
And then I went to watercolor because I could pack it in a pack. And then I got a studio in our house. I started oil painting. And the first thing I did was called a series called Once Proud. Mm-hmm. And that was tried to depict the American Indian. Once proud, their pride denigrated by the positioning we did with them. So I did this whole series, and I'm still doing it.
I bet that's pretty emotional, doing that.
Oh, it's way emotional, and it takes kind of a contemporary form. It's almost if you understand the title of the painting, you would get it immediately. If you walked up to it, I'm not sure you get it. You get some of it, but you wouldn't get that it is about depicting this horrible cultural positioning that we have. Everything from broken treaties to shitty land to, oh gosh, we discovered land on the land by treaty we gave you 20 years ago, so fuck you.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I tried to depict that Once Proud, but now denigrated sense of being that is either tribal or individual, because you're an individual in the tribal. I mean, you get a check from the BIA, and your dad went out and spent it buying booze, so why shouldn't I? It's a free ride. But notwithstanding, and the values of their heritage that are lost through sort of white man's ways and living off BIA checks. These things about beating and art form don't get passed down from mother to daughter.
Yeah.
So it's all about all that stuff.
I'd like to see that at some point.
That whole series of paintings. Yeah.
Are there any books that stand out in your mind that everybody should read about Indians, Native American culture?
I'd probably have to send you the list. It's my bookshelves. That full. The last one I read was the story of Red Cloud, who was a war chief and a fabulous tactician. I could send you all these if you want.
Sure, I'm always looking for good book recommendations.
But see, it talks about people not as a great war chief, but their mindsets and how he outflanked these stupid bluecoats, who were trying to chase him down constantly. And I love that because you learned about the sort of, the Custer deal. Custer was an egocentric fucking maniac. Was only interested in self-promotion, basically, and he got his ass trapped and shot him.
Yeah,
but there were a lot of people like that who they had different purposes. There were some, read about the Kit Carson chasing Navajos, or about Cochise and how he, outthought in terrible, harsh environments, outgunned with 10th people.
Sure.
And it's not just about them winning; it's about how they did it and the belief systems that about being part of the land that was being shrunken, and how that fired their the warlike qualities of these people who didn't live warlike really until we showed up.
And they had to. I recently read one called Empire of the Summer Moon. It's about the Comanches.
Yeah.
I thought that was
That's a Comanche deal.
Yeah.
Tough babies, weren't they?
Really tough.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And that's one of the ones I read long ago. But
that's kind of a mainstream one, but I bet you've got some pretty good ones that I would have.
I got a little more historically researched,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get that list from you because I would love that. I read another good one that I read is Blood and Thunder by Hampton Sides.
That's really good.
I couldn't believe how good that was.
Sides is a great author.
Yeah, he is one of the most talented authors. Everything he writes is just amazing.
Yeah. Blood and Thunder was, I should have put that down there. That's one of the really great, and so is he as an author.
Sure. I need to read everything he's ever written.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some questions that I've asked pretty much everybody I've had on the podcast, and I've gotten some pretty interesting answers, and it's good to kind of compare and contrast. Sure. This one, while we're talking about books, are there any favorite books or books that you recommend to people time and time again over your career? And it can be about architecture, it can be about the West, just a book that's been important to you.
I'd have to say the ones I've recommended, other than mindless fun, like espionage bullshit, you read airplane novels, would be C.H. Sides. Blood and Thunder would be one I've already recommended to a lot of people, and I'd use that because he deals with everything. If you want to use the term conservation. The deconstruction is the opposite side of conservation. And the deconstruction of these lands that were fertile to the meaning of being as a group, a clan, a tribe.
Yeah, I thought that was.
I was hesitating there because I was thinking all the books I recommended to people read are about the history of the West and the conflicts of its
when it's so raw
of its expansion.
It's still it's just a few generations ago when that was going on.
This all started in the 1840s, late 1840s, 1850s were hot spots all over because people were trespassing, as it were, into were considered trespassing into either lands they had or were given, but mostly had for generations, hundreds of years. And, of course, it began when the horse came up through Spain, but the Spaniards and conquistadores. But that changed the whole deal for the Indians, whether their movements and how much they moved, and that was a big change for all the West. But anyway, those books are the ones I've always recommended to people because most people don't have a bloody clue except having memorized some dates in history courses.
It is really amazing how people.
It's about people.
Yeah.
And it's about mindsets and about the expansionism was that's all, I get that, but it was and the idea of just I made it this far and I didn't get scalped and all that stuff was okay. That was a good end game and protecting my family and all that stuff. I mean, I'm going to have to hunt on these lands, but there was it wasn't even a question. Was there any honor or principle to what to do or not to do? It was all about us, me, and
expand at all costs.
Territorial imperative, riches, mining.
I think that's interesting what you said, that it's all about people, because I read a ton and I found that just reading straight up history books is boring, but if I read a biography about a certain person in a certain time frame, then it's so interesting. And then there are all these different ways you can jut off, and you can, they'll mention another person and you can read a biography by that person and you start kind of putting it together. That's kind of like this podcast.
Yeah. Even about like the book Gentlemen of London, you've read that?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's about, is it called Gentlemen of London or something? Gentleman's the wrong term. But anyway, it's about Edward R. Murrow and all these guys who were trying to influence Roosevelt into joining England against the Axis.
Okay.
And all the personal stuff.
That's what it's all about?
Yeah. Harriman was there. Averell Harriman. I mean...
Yeah, I need to read that. That sounds great. Do you have any documentaries or films that you love or that have been important to you?
Actually, most recently, Peter McBride's did a little movie, and the book about the green, going down the
Emerald Mile.
Emerald Mile.
That was great.
I mean, that's a book, not a documentary, but it documents the
thing. The documentary you're talking about, was it about that boatman in the Grand Canyon?
No, it was about the Grand Canyon itself.
Oh, about the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen.
Yeah.
I'll look that up.
It probably because it's. I have a lot of opportunity in Aspen that we can see a film fest every night.
Sure.
Practically the Institute or wherever, 2 film fests. So I don't go for entertainment more. I think I go for when things seem to align themselves with my growing or in-house interests, in-heart interests. Yeah, so I'd say that the...
I'll look that one up. See, that's exactly why I ask. I get all these good book recommendations.
I know. I get this. This is a search for a book
Even
list.
if nobody listens to this, I win. I get book recommendations. So you obviously do a ton of outdoor recreation. We didn't even really hit on that, but hiking, mountain bike. When I talked to you the other day, you just got off your mountain bike. What else do you do?
God.
Everything?
Hiking, camping, backpacking, mountain biking, road biking,
fishing,
hiking, fly fishing, bird hunting is a big passion. I returned to Montana and South Dakota an addict.
I bet so.
But that's from, being smart about my grandparents' father were bird hunters, upland bird hunters, pheasant and Hungarian partridge and sharp-tailed grouse and all that crowd.
Is there any hobby you have that would be surprising for people listening?
That would surprise them? I don't know if the painting would surprise. See, I paint for me.
Yeah.
I have such a low opinion of my own character that I believe that if I had an art show and sold things, that I would probably start painting for them and not for me. So I just stay away from that. That's
smart. That's very wise. I think that takes self-restraint too. I like that.
But see, I'm so bound up in the creative process of creating a painting that, I could be out there for an hour. I usually come home, change into my paint bibs, which really look horrible, but they keep paint off of things that Phyllis doesn't want paint on. Not me, but and I will get a weed dram of single malt. I take it out to my art studio, and if this is before dinner, she'll wait sometimes till 8:30, and then just say enough's enough, But I will go back. Sometimes, it's just like
that's great.
Anything you're passionate about, you don't know where time goes. You're just so involved. And I remember another experience like that when I was doing pen and ink sketches all over Europe and Argentina, wherever, Montana. I would sit someplace like in Firenze or Florence or some urban kind of place, and I would sit there in my little thing and I'd be looking up there, and people. At first, I felt self-conscious because people would stop and say, "What are you doing?" And I would say, "I'm sketching," or something like that to get rid of them. And after a while, I could close my mind down on just the sketch, and I would wake up literally, I'd be so focused that it was like being in a daze.
That's great.
And I would wake up, and the sketch would be there. And I didn't even acknowledge this crowd, not crowding around me, crowding because to watch me what I was doing, but crowding around me to get out of, go around me.
Sure.
To let the passage of pedestrian, the noise, the sounds, the babble.
That's, people work real hard to get in that flow state.
That's no different from any other passion. If you're onto something.
Sure.
And and there's this part about creativity where you're stuck, but the promise of fulfilling that is there. Mm-hmm. Somehow the energy that you're going to get it, that is amazing.
It is.
It's an amazing moment.
I really think being able to enter that flow state, whether it's through creative process or through meditation or whatever, I really think that's a key to
when
happiness.
You're not there. You're there, but you're not there. I mean, all the motors are on.
I think that's.
But your sensory world has been shut down to focus.
This crazy, internet and the phones and Facebook and it just destroys people's ability to pay attention. And I'm as guilty as anybody. But I think being able to get in that state is key.
It can't come. It's got to come from passion.
Yeah,
I think easier. I would find it's much easier for me to be in passion than it is to retreat in meditation. Mm-hmm. And I have not that I tried it. I just don't think I'm very good at it. Or have other things that are as personally fulfilling.
Well, you can get there enjoying yourself too. Yeah.
Or I can just be up in the mountains in a little, at the end of a valley that I haven't been into. I can go back and.
I'll love to hear your answer to this. What is the craziest thing that's ever happened to you in the outdoors? And that could be with all your travels. I'm sure you've had some crazy,
craziest thing.
And it can be funny, scary.
Yeah, I have to think for a second. This is drawing. I got to draw off a lot of crust to get to this one.
Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I don't know why I come to this. I was had skied over Crested Butte from Aspen, and I was on that other side of the mountain. Mm-hmm. And down a little lower off the 12,000 feet that I'd climbed over. Mm-hmm. And I climbed over with others, but then they went on to Crested Butte, and I think this is the way it happened. But anyway, I was out there in this bright day with wonderful snowfields, and in that part of the altitude where you're interspersed parks and trees, that. And I ran across this guy. He was coming up the other way, and I went down to him. There were only two of us there. It was Yvon Chouinard.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he did. I said, I'm Larry, and he said, I'm Yvon. I said, because I kind of recognized Yvon Chouinard. Yeah. So we passed a couple words. There was no great, spiritual exchange or anything like that. It was just, we were both there for our own version of the same reason.
Very interesting. He's one of my heroes.
Well, mine too, for many reasons. Giving back, inventive, starting a company out of passion.
Yes. Not afraid to take his own path.
No.
That is.
And he's giving back a lot. And I then re-met him at a film fest in Five Points.
Okay.
At Carbondale, and I mentioned this to him, and he, again, just like the Indian girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't forefront in his mind.
Yeah.
That would even happen.
Wow.
And I was sort of, what do you mean it wasn't important to you?
That's great. This is another question that I'll be interested to hear your answer to. What is your favorite location in the West? And it could be a trail, top of a certain mountain, a lake, town.
Yeah, favorite location in the West. It would be in the hill country outside of Geyser, Montana. Okay, and that's near the Highwood Mountains or out from Great Falls.
Sure.
But it's when I'm out there walking my ass off, watching dogs, watching the wind, and usually with someone hunting sharp-tailed grouse, just walking miles. And And I don't know if there's too many parallels to that, but that's the one that flashed it.
That's it, yeah.
To me, yeah.
That's a great answer.
But it's it's broader than place.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, that's the one that just most recently came to my mind, and that is because also it's like real prairie grass. It's like buffalo grass.
Yeah.
The shit they ate on before
Supposed to be
before all these fields of wheat and stuff came about, and
that's a great answer.
so it was native. It was as it was, and you could see mountains in the distance, or climb these cliffs, or you climb these buttes. I didn't climb them because there's too many rattlesnakes. But that's part of the deal. I used to, when I was a kid, 11 years old, I had this fly rod, and I'd attach a copper wire with a loop on the end, and I'd go rattlesnake hunting. And I could sell them to the vet.
Oh, wow.
Who milked it.
So you just scoop them up with the fly
Well,
rod?
yeah. And then I had this big glove. It scared the shit out of it. There's a snake. You got him by the neck, but he's not happy.
We're hardwired to be scared of this
And
thing.
so these big, no fang could get through these. You grab them by the neck and just hope you did. You shove them in a gunny sack. There's usually two of us. I mean, and sometimes we just had to put them on the ground until they quieted down, put a fork over their, like a fork, nail their head to the ground. Not killing them,
Sure.
of course, but pretty wild moments.
That is wild. Wow. So this is another question I'll be interested to hear your take on. What do you think the biggest challenge and or opportunity facing the American West is currently?
I think they're the one and the same word as I use in architecture. Impediments are only opportunities. Mm-hmm. So what is it? I think water and water quality probably are going to be where the next war of the West is fought. And it's being fought in regulatory worlds all over the place. Yeah. Water rights, water quality, water use. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lesson, even for ranchers, into there's a use it or lose it.
Oh yeah,
part of water, as you know well. If you're selling ranches, you know goddamn well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the more I learn, the more I realize
how to be more sustainable in the way you irrigate, and if the laws would let you dump that back into the river, the stuff you didn't use. Mm-hmm. Then you wouldn't have to in the fall, crank up your pump meter to use your allocation of owned water rights.
Yeah, out of fear of not.
So I think water, and that implies everything from riparian quality to the clarity and enrichment of rivers for fishing and use and enjoyment. That backs up into watersheds. Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes forever. But if you want to bring it down, I think that's my answer.
I think that's a good answer, and I think you're not alone. In everybody I asked that question to, I bet 80% of the people say water. There's no way around it. Whether you're a rancher or whether you're just a straight up real estate developer.
Yeah.
No matter what side you're on, it's going to be an issue.
Right.
Then one more kind of quick question. Well, you don't have to give a quick answer, but if you could go back and give yourself, when you were graduating from architecture school, say you just got out, and knowing everything you know now, and you could give yourself some advice, what would that advice be?
The advice goes beyond architecture school, goes to what I give my kids. If you're lucky enough to find your passion, follow it, irrespective of where it takes you. No end goals, not that you're going to make, $500,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Find a passion. Somehow everything works out. Mm-hmm. Learn it, follow it. And I did that. I didn't know I was doing that, though. Mm-hmm. So there's no shift in the paradigm for me because I got lucky. I was the blind squirrel that finally found an acorn. So I don't really think that answers your...
No, I think that's a great one, because I would imagine, I bet when you went to work at the big law firm, the big architecture firm, I would think, even though you were enjoying it, there would be a question of, well, should I stay here and play it safe, or should I follow my passion and go out on my own?
Well, there was exactly that question. Yeah. I sat there with 2 graduate degrees, doing stuff I thought I could do, but I didn't think it was in one firm.
It takes bravery.
And I just sat there and did this rudimentary shit. But I, all along, was always going to be my own man. And so
it comes through. It comes through in your personal life, and it comes through in your work.
Yeah. And that was important to me. It was important to me to learn the tools and to assert myself toward that goal, which I did sort of out of accident anyway. We found there it was in Aspen, starting a firm. Nobody lined up at the door. So what did we do? We set up a darkroom, took black and white photos, and we went skiing. And it was on a ski lift that we met this guy that says, "Oh, you're a young architect." And I'm sure he was a developer, but a really nice guy. So he said, "Oh, you guys are, or you are, it was me. Oh, you're an architect. Well, I'm thinking of building this house in Snowmass." Well, anyway, we connected. He it was a big house, the biggest house in Aspen at that point, and that was okay at that point too. But he said, "Well, what do you charge?" Charge? I mean, I have no idea how to figure out a fee. So we went back, the 2 of us, 3 of us, and we added up gas cost, rental, ski tickets, meals, basics, and added it up for 4 months worth of time, and said, it's this.
Seems like a logical way to do it.
And later he told us that we'd left $40,000 on the table.
Oh, lesson learned.
And it was such a joyous deal. We didn't care if we left. We got to work.
That's great. That's a great story. So next to the last question, if you could make a request of people listening to this podcast, and it's people who love the American West in one way or the other, whether that's through sports or art or, through their profession, is there a certain thing, ask you would make of the people listening?
It would be to listen with all your senses to the opportunities in spirituality embodied in the West then and now. And I think you'll find them the same. I think the outcomes and the decision-making were about different values or outcome or end games or outcomes. But it would be find that sense of adventure, employ it through your lifestyle to your passions. But that, if you really get, what the earth is saying and what the history of settlement and habitation we're saying, listen to that, or you get it in different ways. But if your antennas are up, I think you'll find that there is a spirit of living in the West that's entirely different from the spirit of living in other places. I mean, it is a nation.
Yes. To
me.
I agree.
That's kind of, I guess that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's
perfect. And antennas up doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you're going to get it in your way.
Sure.
Through the layers of your own experience, if you're willing.
Very wise. So how can people learn more about you and your firm? I know your firm's got a
website.
I'll put links to all of that.
And never make a decision simply based on the website. That just gets you in the door.
Sure.
Then we talk about, are we connected? Do we have enough shared values to launch?
Yeah. That's a good position to be in. I've heard time and time again, I'm starting to experience in my career that over time, the longer you work, the more you attract people that are like you, like-minded people.
Oh, I think so.
And it seems like you're in a great place with that.
I am. Well, and again, I will make the choice. I mean, I'm not afraid to say to somebody in the nicest possible, polite way that I don't think we share enough, values that this would be productive for either of us. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in being, productive. By that I mean engaged, sure, turned on.
Yeah.
And do we, if you like log cabins, I know a guy in Jackson who should be your man.
Well, this is so great. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It was really fun. I mean, it just became a chat, and I like that you reduced it to an informal.
Good. Well, I don't know what I'm doing. So.
Kind of chat. I know. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.